The Plucky Squire is a muddled mess of indecisive game design. Okay, admittedly, that sounds a bit harsh, but I seriously can't quite decide whether or not I like this game. From an artistic standpoint, the game is so damn charming. I adore this art direction. The game is also extremely polished, with fantastic voice acting and sound design as well. But from a game design standpoint, it just feels like we're presented with this genius, fourth-wall-breaking, mind-bending mechanic of jumping between 2D and 3D, and the developers failed to use it in interesting ways. Hear me out. We're thrown into this incredible and unique setting where our playable character is a 2D drawing in a children's storybook that gains the ability to exit the page out into the real world as a 3D character on the desk of a child's bedroom. That alone is super complex and so cool. It's what sold me on buying the game. I was expecting some great puzzles and platforming elements that use this unique mechanic to its full degree. And at times, I saw glimmers of intriguing puzzle solving. But for the vast majority of the experience, the gameplay remains extremely simple and handholdy the entire way through. So I lost my excitement quickly. None of the puzzles really challenged me. For the most part, I was able to figure out exactly what I needed to do even before I had all the pieces to the puzzle. And look, I'm not an idiot. Obviously, I acknowledge that this game was clearly meant for kids. I mean, the storyline holds onto the kid-friendly storybook attitude the entire time. But in my opinion, I feel like it shouldn't have been. It makes me wonder whether the presence of Devolver Digital added pressure on the studio's design choices for the game to appeal to a wider and younger audience. This could have played a major part in limiting this game's potential, because in an effort to reach that younger demographic and sell more copies, the game design would have to be simplified. So they wouldn't be able to use this incredibly creative mechanic to its fullest potential, because then the puzzles would become too difficult for a child to complete. But all that does is leave a bad taste in my mouth, because handholdy game design makes a player feel like the game doesn't respect their intelligence, leading to a more dull experience that doesn't push the boundaries of what the mechanic had to offer. So okay, a choice was made. The Plucky Squire was clearly going to be a fun-for-all-ages kids game. But for a kids game, there's some pretty serious themes going on here in the story. First of all, the villain straight up succeeds in his evil plan to alter the course of history. And while executing his plan, he does all sorts of horrible things. He raids this troll village, locks away all the townsfolk, kills their elder, and mines their metal resources from the mountain with a giant death machine. Then he creates an army with literal tanks, raids a city, completely destroying it, and kills off the best character in the game. And then he morphs into this absolute nightmare fuel of a final boss trying to kill you off for good. Pretty horrifying stuff for a supposed children's story. It just feels like the developers couldn't quite decide on what they wanted their game to be. They had this awesome storyline centered around a fresh, new, and unique mechanic that was screaming to be an incredible puzzle adventure game with a great story. But then, they sacrificed all of it to operate as a kids game, filled to the brim with brainless hack-and-slash combat, simple puzzles with a generous hint system, underwhelming items, and a repetitive structure that copies too many mechanics from other games. There are clear influences to other titles throughout the entirety of the Plucky Squire. The main storybook gameplay has an isometric world, with combat similar to the original Zelda game, but updated to be something more akin to Cult of the Lamb. But sometimes, it transforms into 2D platforming sections that are reminiscent of Zelda 2. Venturing out of the storybook and into the third dimension, the game looks like a mashup of the new Zelda clay art style with a setting of a childhood bedroom that brings me back to It Takes Two. Then, the word puzzles are in alignment with a dumbed-down version of Baba Is You, which contrasts heavily from the action-packed minigame segments that bring my mind to something like WarioWare or Rhythm Heaven. All of these mechanics are packaged systematically into a childhood storybook setting where our hero, our villain, and all our friends we meet along the way are all breaking the fourth wall constantly, after learning that they're characters in a storybook whose lives are being narrated by a soothing British man's voice. It sounds like a complete logical mess from a writer's perspective, but the writers molded all these factors together exceptionally well. But before we get into the deep details, please subscribe and like the video. I love doing gaming content, and your support would mean a lot to me. Alright, let's take a deep dive into the game of the Plucky Squire. We play as the famed adventurer and defender of the realm, the Plucky Squire named Jot, who wields this old-school fountain pen sword. Not only is he the greatest hero in the land of Mojo, but he also writes about his adventures and is a famous author. Everyone in Mojo knows him for his heroic acts. The land is ruled by Queen Chroma, with her castle located in the capital city of Artia, and the villain of this world is the evil sorcerer Humgrub. Playing the game, like any good storybook, it of course begins with Chapter 1. This game is broken up into 10 chapters total. Chapter 1 starts with Jot investigating some music coming from outside his house. The music was coming from the next door neighbor, which was the home of the great wizard Moonbeard, who happened to be Jot's mentor. He explains to Jot that he's been traveling to other realms to find the greatest songs in the universe, and he asks Jot to fetch him some beeswax so he can press more music records. And so, our quest begins with the task of summoning Honey Peak to gather some beeswax. As I said before, this aspect of the game functions like any isometric Zelda, with the only controls being a dodge roll and a slash of the sword. But very quickly, Honey Peak shifts us to the 2D platforming style of Zelda 2, as we slay goblins and ascend Honey Peak. At the top of the mountain, we find this bumblebee, whose hive is being ransacked of its honey by a giant honey badger. He hears us coming and launches at us to attack, but Jot is ready for the fight. After the initiation of combat, the gameplay shifts again to a sort of boxing minigame where Jot can throw jabs and hooks and also dodge the badger's incoming punches. I certainly didn't expect this kind of variety based on my prior assumptions for what this game was going to be. So after knocking the badger around with Jot's fists, the badger flies off the mountain and Jot is victorious. The bee is so grateful that we saved his home from being ransacked that he willingly lends Jot some beeswax for helping him out. And then, something evil takes place.
Down they fell.
Oof. Moonbeard confirms to Jot that Humgrump was once again up to no good. Moonbeard also slips up a little bit in this conversation and teases the upcoming plot by saying, "This is not how the story normally goes." Suddenly, a new character appears from the bushes.
It was Violet. Violet was a trainee witch with a love of art and Jot's childhood friend.
And so, Moonbeard urges us to head to Tome Tower, the owl structure that was the site of the calamity Humgrump is causing. On the road to Tome Tower, I found my first collectible, this art scroll. This game has two types of collectibles, concept art scrolls and glitch birds. There's 50 art scrolls total in this game and 10 glitch birds total, with each chapter having one hidden bird. But as far as I know, the collectibles don't really give you anything other than an achievement and a badge on your save file, so I wasn't too worried about finding them all. We find our first word puzzle here, where the sentence on the ground has been sabotaged with words missing. Searching around the page, we find the words gate and open. To finish the sentence, the gate swung open, which when we put the sentence back together, opened the gate in the world around Jot. So as I said before, essentially like a simplified Baba Is You puzzle. We then find Martina, who is the merchant character in the Land of Mojo. She will sell us art scrolls and combat upgrades for Jot to use. The currency in this game are these light bulbs that are hidden in most of the bushes and trees throughout the game. The first upgrade we can buy is the sword throw, which lets Jot boomerang his spinning sword at enemies to deal damage. And then, this happened.
Oh, bother.
Luckily, Jot and Violet are saved by their mountain troll friend named Thrash. The three of them were all childhood friends and were now reunited as a crew. Together, they need to climb down the mountain so they can continue onward towards Tome Tower. And after a downward 2D platforming section, we come to this next area where we find this miniature version of Moonbeard. Turns out he's an entirely separate character called Minibeard. He actually just functions as a hint system in case you get stuck on a puzzle. But he's also a character with his own identity too. Then we come to our next word puzzle that involves this cat fellow named Topsy. Topsy will give us a key if we can get him his biscuits, but the problem is, they're blocked by the terrain. But by altering this sentence back and forth by switching out the words forest and ruin, we can drag his bin of biscuits all the way over to Topsy. Doing this causes Topsy to roll over, revealing not only a key to the door, but also the fact that he was actually upside down the whole time, and he wears a funny little purple top hat. Then we find Martina again, and she's actually selling two more attack options for Jot, the jump attack and the spin attack. The jump attack has Jot perform a landing plunge of his sword doing damage in a circle around him, and the spin attack has Jot swinging his sword in a circle, also damaging everything around him. Essentially just like Zelda. As we progress closer to the tower, things start to look gloomy. Now I didn't notice it at the time, but the world outside the book actually goes from day to night when the gloomy shift inside the book happens. The land goes dark, and green lightning starts spawning in these green gooey enemies. I took my first bit of damage here and noticed a large health wheel. I was quickly starting to realize that this game was not going to be difficult. It is pretty easy to not get hit in most situations, and even still, once I noticed how many health items this game throws at you after every battle, I started to go into every action recklessly and still never died. But that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. At that point, I had already realized that the game was meant to appeal to a younger audience, so I was just hoping to be roped in by the experience. We find our first enemy door of many here, which is basically a mechanic that makes you defeat all the enemies on screen before the red monster gate drops and allows you to progress. Then we come to a river with no way to reach the other side. This scholarly worm named Paige, that is almost certainly a bookworm reference, tells us that Humgrump destroyed the bridge and we need to find another way around. So we find this staircase down underground and I'm plunged into another 2D platforming segment in this cave. At the other side of the river, we come to this road that has books scattered all across the grass, and then another word puzzle screen. Here, I had to change the sentence from stacked books to scattered books in order to clear the path. Then take the word stacked and put it back in the other sentence to stack these pages together and drag it into the pit so that we could cross the gap. And finally, we reach the ominous Tome Tower. At the entrance, we see this mysterious hooded figure who sees us coming on the path and flees. But the gang pays no attention to him, and Violet and Thrash wait behind at the entrance, allowing Jot to go defeat Humgrump on his own, just as the story has always gone beforehand. But this time was different. On the roof, Humgrump is awaiting our arrival. He erupts into a great big monologue about how he was expecting us to show up before revealing a copy of the storybook, the Plucky Squire, which he actually found inside Tome Tower. Somehow, Humgrump has discovered the storybook and realized that he is the predetermined villain and loser of this book's story. In an effort to change the course of history, Humgrump uses his magic staff to grab Jot, separate him from his sword, and push him outside of the storybook entirely into the real world. So Jot, now a 3D clay character, defenseless without his sword, is on top of his own closed storybook on the desk of the book owner. This kid's desk is a mess too. It's a maze of arts and crafts items that we must navigate through in the dead of night to find a way back into the book. Suddenly, we hear a voice coming from inside a Plucky Squire lunchbox. Yanking open the lunchbox, on the inside is a sticky note, where the bookworm girl appears to talk to Jot. Apparently, bookworms are literary interdimensional beings that can travel across all kinds of parchment. She explains that it's important we make our way back into the book, and that there might be an item on the desk that can help us open the book back up. This will become a repetitive mechanic in the game, where every roadblock Humgrump tries to stop us with will be counterable with some new useful item that we will find on the desk outside the storybook. Here, we're introduced to our first portal. These green swirls allow Jot to jump in and out of the 2D paper world and into the 3D world. It's a phenomenon called metamagic, which is what Humgrump wields with his staff. Paige the Bookworm tells us that these drawings were made by a creative young boy named Sam, who is the owner of this room we're in, and by feeding this rabbit a carrot from the lunchbox in the real world that we transported into this drawing, we're able to progress further on the desk. Paige informs us to watch out for these beetles that are on the desk because Sam likes to keep them as pets. Unfortunately, without a sword, we would need to stealthily sneak past the beetles or they would eat us. So by holding right trigger, we can quietly sneak through the beetles and avoid capture. Paige explains to us that Sam is an aspiring novelist who will grow up to become a storybook writer himself. How she knows this is beyond me. I guess she's some kind of all-powerful Time Lord or something. But she explains to Jot that he desperately needs to stop Humgrump or it will alter the course of Sam's life completely. And after one more stealth section, we finally grab the Turn Gauntlets. This item allows Jot to stand at the bottom of the storybook and turn the pages of the chapter we're playing in, which means now we're able to reopen and re-enter the book and go after Humgrump. Chapter 3 begins with a little bit of training and recap with Moonbeard about exiting and entering the book with portals. Moonbeard reveals to Jot that he knew about the reality of their world being a storybook and how dangerous it is that Humgrump now knows it too. He also gives us what he calls a rune tooth headset to communicate with him from outside the book and sends us out of the story through one of the portals. Interestingly, the sun comes back up in the real world now too, showering the desk with golden light through the window. By expressing thirst, Moonbeard teaches us that sometimes if we're stuck on a puzzle, there might be items on the other pages that we can look for to help us progress. The edges of the book will glow on pages that have useful items. So in this case, we hop into the page with Jot and Moonbeard's houses and head into Moonbeard's hut to grab him a soda. After delivering the soda, we hop out of the book and turn the page forward, revealing our friends waiting for us with our sword on top of Tome Tower, with Humgrump gone. Thrash and Violet are discussing their lack of courage to help Jot, before being relieved by Jot's re-emergence into existence. Moonbeard explains to the three of them that they must hurry to the capital city Artia to warn Queen Chromia of Humgrump's mischief. Violet is excited for the trip to her hometown, and the three of them set off after we reunite Jot with his sword.
Chapter 4. A Treacherous Trail.
After that short Chapter 3, we're into Chapter 4 in Sonnet Swamp, an unknown territory that apparently Jot has never ventured to before in his stories. Inside the swamp, we lose Runetooth connection with Moonbeard, and so we finally get our first full storybook level in this swamp filled with poetic references and wordplay as we try to make it to Artia. Trekking on throughout the swamp, we're fighting bugs across giant lily pads. As it turns out, these enemy bugs were not native to the swamp. This snail friend tells us that Humgrump dropped this huge nest in the swamp that released all the bug enemies. Then on the next page, Humgrump appears and showers this goblin with metamagic, releasing him into the real world. So now outside the book, enemies were running rampant on Sam's desk. Then I came to this word puzzle that had this bug blocking the way. So I needed to navigate to this sentence to grab the word tiny and change this bug from big to small and continue up the road. On the next page, unfortunately, this bridge was destroyed. But I noticed a changeable sentence about a tiny lily pad in the river. So using my knowledge from the previous puzzle, I hopped out of the book to go back 2 pages and grab the word huge from the last puzzle, which then made the lily pad now huge, allowing us to cross the water. This poor fish was flopping on the shore, so I quickly ran down to try to save it when this minigame occurred. My goal was to catch the fish in Jot's hand, but as it turns out, fish are pretty slippery. Eventually though, I made the catch and returned the fish to the water. The fish was named Floatio, and he thanked us for saving his life. Turns out, the bug's nest crashing into the swamp had zapped him out of the water. He bid us farewell as he swam away to go find his true love, and we moved on up the path. It was here when the swamp turned to night and we came to our next puzzle page. As it turns out, that buffer page with the narrator was actually useful because I could steal the word daytime from the sentence up top. This made the puzzle a matter of changing the swamp from day to night, which altered these frogs' positioning. In the daytime, the frogs would stop singing and hop over a bit to go to sleep. The next page we come to has the snail family asking for our help. Their home inside this tree stump is overrun with flying bugs, but the gang, not owning a long-range weapon, are stumped as to how they're going to take care of the situation and progress through the house. So, we hit a roadblock in the book, and now what we're going to have to do is venture out onto Sam's desk to find a ranged weapon. Sam's desk is now overrun with goblins and nasty bugs that we need to fight through to reach the top of the desk. According to Minibeard, apparently there's a card game character with a bow that we might be able to borrow up ahead. So I fought my way in and out of 2D and 3D, up the castle Sam built on his desk, ziplining across flags, and defeating more bugs until we reached this elf ranger on this Magic the Gathering-esque card. Hopping into her card art, we're launched into turn-based combat. Now for some reason, I thought this was like an Undertale situation, so I decided to spam talk to her and see if Jot could lay down some riz. But apparently, just like me in real life, Jot doesn't have any, and she just kinda shot me until I was dead and Paige came in to heal me. So Jot, on his incel arc, beat her up until she decided to listen to us and we came to a mutual understanding of each other. Aluinia, now believing our story that we're trying to stop Humgrump, decides to lend us her bow to aid us in our quest. So we return to our book, and in a nice little minigame sequence, we shot all the bugs to death, saving the snails home. At the end of the swamp was the town of Snailford, a village filled with snailfolk with a big stage in the center of it. These poetic snails seemed to be well read and were fans of the Plucky Squire's books, but they needed our help to eradicate the bugs from their town and bring back their sacred books from the famed author Shellspeare. So this whole swamp of snail poets were all based around Shakespeare's work, and by saving the books, we're rewarded with a short little play from our snail friends. A bit anticlimactic, but moving on from the town, we're on the road again, where a giant bug swoops in and kidnaps Thrash and Violet. So readying the elven bow, we're launched into another bow minigame to defeat this mini-boss. But of course, he was no match for Jot, and defeating this bug meant our time with the bow was up. And Aluinia congratulates us and magically takes her bow back. On our way out of the swamp, we're stopped by our fish friend Floatio. Turns out, Floatio was supposed to be like Romeo, and he actually ended up finding his love, Gilead. Good for them, I suppose. Hopefully they both live very long and happy lives.
Chapter 5 Artia.
Chapter 5 brings us, of course, to the capital city of Artia. It's basically a town where every house is made up of art supplies, and every resident is a mimic of real-life artists or art pieces. There's Vincent van Gogh, Salvador Dali, Frida Kahlo, and even Banksy. And then, the Mona Lisa and the Scream Guy are also just hanging around town. This capital city is Violet's home, and it kinda all makes sense now with her colored pencil witch hat and her paintbrush wand. After rescuing this guy's pigs, we're halted by this giant pig that we clearly don't have the capacity to clear away. So with another roadblock, Moonbeard urges us to venture outside the book to find something that will help us move the giant pig. And just like that, the desk around the storybook had changed. I suppose it's implied that Sam is moving stuff around in the daytime while we're in the book. But our next item lies at the top of this cardboard hotel. Once again, we're fighting 3D versions of enemies as we make our way to the top of the desk, where we can enter the hotel and begin climbing our way to the top, through the floors of the structure that Sam has built. In the attic, we acquire the tilt gauntlets. This item essentially allows Jot to tilt the entire book on its side or even completely close the book, meaning now we can tilt the book on its side, which rolls our giant pig friend to the left in the town into this mud pit. Heading towards the castle, we find Moonbeard and his mouse companion waiting for us outside. Together, the 5 of us venture into the castle led by one of the Queen's maidens to meet with Queen Chroma. Moonbeard explains to the Queen that Humgrump is going to try to alter the book's story, which will result in the book being put on the shelf forever. The Queen asks for our aid in stopping Humgrump's antics, and Moonbeard devises a plan. Jot and Thrash will go after Humgrump and try to figure out and put a stop to his plans, while Moonbeard and Violet will return home and work on developing a counter magic to defend against Humgrump's metamagic. Violet is surprised by this, and Moonbeard ushers her and Thrash to believe in themselves and their abilities. Considering they've always been side characters before, they probably have never had to do anything for themselves, since Jot was always written to stop the villain himself. And so, with the plan in place, Trarg Mountain, Thrash's home located in the background of the Queen's balcony, explodes. So into Chapter 6, climbing up the mountain, this rock bunny alerts us to the fact that Humgrump's army is invading Thrash's village. Ascending up the mountain, we learn about this new mechanic with these star-like metamagic portals. Using them causes Jot to spin as a ball and be launched from portal to portal outside the book before re-entering the book at the other portal location. This mechanic is used in all sorts of puzzles coming up for traversal, including this first one where we need to get these rock and roll hand keys to open this gate. Then we meet Krong. He's the king of Thrash's village, who has plummeted from the peaks above and is now lying on the ground in a weakened state. Krong warns us that Humgrump's army is mining their metal from the mountain. He tells Thrash that his time is up, and he will be ascending to Trollhalla, but he needs Thrash to rise up to his potential and become the Metal Warrior to stop Humgrump. And with that, he turns to stone and his rock and roll ghost bursts up into the skies above. We then come to this gate where this rock bunny says we need a pass to get through the checkpoint. This other rock bunny tips us off to the location of a pass being in a nearby cave. So hopping out of the book and turning one page back, we go to this pitch black section on the other page and find a portal into the cave inside the mountain. Fighting through the dark cave, we head down the staircase where the page turns, and now we have this minecart puzzle where we need to tilt the book to move the minecart around the abandoned mine to get this pass in this red chest. Back at the gate, we head through and find this stage-like platform where Ghost Krong comes back on a rental cloud to teach Thrash the ways of the Metal Warrior, which just involves a little minigame where we need to time our swings with the music and break objects he throws at us. Then, some objects can be hit back at Krong to defeat him and complete Thrash's training, sort of like a Rhythm Heaven minigame. Then on the next page, we see Humgrump's men carrying a giant metal screw. Moonbeard reveals to us that Humgrump has stolen a bunch of machinery from another book on Sam's desk, titled Machines of Mayhem. So clearly Humgrump is using the metal from the mountain and the machinery from the other book to create some sort of contraption. We then come to another word puzzle where this giant rat attacks us whenever we try to head up the path. So what we need to do is turn this block to metal to smash through this wall by tilting the book. This leads us to a dark cave that we can illuminate by changing the metal block to a glowing block. Then in the cave, we find the word cheese and change it to a cheese block, which distracts the rat, allowing us to pass. After fighting our way through snakes, which Thrash is afraid of, we come to this giant spinning blade machine that we cannot pass. So once again, another roadblock, and Moonbeard sets us off onto Sam's desk to find an item to help stop the machine. The desk is now illuminated in the nighttime with glow-in-the-dark space-themed items. Our new quest becomes helping this little rocket friend on this mug reassemble his father, who is a larger rocket. Hopping out of the mug, this little rocket becomes a jetpack to help us navigate the outside world a bit easier. On this other mug, this Gelatin King wants us to light 6 candles for a rocket ship part. So wandering around, I lit the candles, and sure enough, we get a piece of the rocket ship. The next mug with a rocket part was located at the top of this platforming segment, which was pretty simple. Shout out to my boy Terry the Alien. And then, the third part was located on this giant cookie tin where we gain a laser rifle and have to fly around the cylinder container, killing robots, defending the base, and saving scientists. After doing just that, the general of the base rewards us with the last piece of the Father Rocket Ship. Father Rocket Ship is thankful that we reassembled him, and he rewards us with the stop stamp. With this, we can stamp objects in the book to freeze them in place. So of course, now we're able to stop the giant blade machine and move on through Trarg Mountain, which brings us to the fight with the Mega Eagle. This hardcore eagle essentially brings back the rhythm minigame we just played with Krong, and Thrash is able to defeat him by knocking a metal bolt back at the eagle, to which the eagle is impressed with Thrash's skill and flies away. Then we get a little update on Violet and Moonbeard's progress at countering Humgrump's metamagic. It seems they're making good progress, and Violet has questions about her existence being a storybook character. Moonbeard explains it to her and even breaks the fourth wall, encouraging us, the player, who is looking into their story. But the actual point of this little scene was to give Jot a chance to go back a page and enter Moonbeard's house, because back on the mountain, the path was blocked by these thick vines. Moonbeard tells us he can whip up some weed killer, but he needs an ingredient called a crush room to make it, which we immediately find one and jump back a page to give it to Moonbeard. He whips us up a bomb of weed killer, and we can now move on through the village. This type of mechanic seemed super weird to introduce, considering we didn't have to look hard at all to find the ingredient, and then there's only 3 total vines, all located in this chapter, and then the game never uses this kind of obstacle again. It's just kind of like, why? On the next page, this giant rock golem Ghazi stands in our way and won't let us pass, even though Thrash knows him. What we need to do is go back to Moonbeard's house, grab another weed killer bomb to access this cave, then tilt the book to drop this pillar down as a bridge to get the word fractured from this sentence. Then by changing these giant speaker pillars to fractured and using the stop stamp on Ghazi, we can smash the pillars over his head and knock him out. Finally, we reach Trarg Village. Jaunter Thrash enter battle with Humgrump's army in an attempt to stop the machine from mining away at the mountain. Thrash, now with the confidence to fight alongside us after the Mega Eagle battle, basically helps us defeat the enemies and pull these switches off the machine. After killing a bunch of soldiers, the gates would drop and I would use these launchers to exit the book and stop stamp the giant saw blade so Thrash could pull a switch off the door. Once all the switches were pulled off, the inner workings of the machine were revealed, and by attacking the machine, it malfunctions and goes driving off the mountain.
The giant machine fell. And exploded on the ground below into approximately 280 million pieces.
We then save the village people who are trapped under a metal cage. Thrash's parents are here and they express how proud they are of him. When Moonbeard interrupts us and tells us that Humgrump's army were definitely transporting the metal off the mountain somewhere. And sure enough, looking off the edge of the cliff, we spot a large convoy hauling away precious metals into the distance. Following the convoy brings us to Chapter 7 at the Boogie Beach. Here, most of the enemies start to become Humgrump's soldiers, and we follow the tracks of the giant convoy along the beach. We come across this buried starfish whom we can't seem to pull out of the sand. Apparently, Boogie sand is incredibly hard to dig up, and the starfish who's not buried tells us that someone named Tumba is the only person that can save her starfish friend. So hopping out of the book and going back a few pages to the Chapter 7 title card, we find this tiny round flamingo napping under a silhouetted palm tree. Tumba is a little flamingo guy with a plastic shovel on his back, who will be our new companion for Boogie Beach. We take him back to the site of the starfish, and with ease, he digs him up and drops the gate ahead. Then all of a sudden, Violet comes crashing through the bushes and rejoins the party as well. So after a little reunion, we come to our next puzzle, which involves getting 2 Skull-Eye gems to drop the gate ahead. The puzzle just involves turning the ocean back and forth from ice to water to reach other islands and fight enemies to acquire the gems. The next page has another immense roadblock. Humgrump's army had the literal tanks and they were going to explode us if we got anywhere near them. And then, once again, Moonbeard drops us a call telling us that we need to go out into the real world to retrieve yet another helpful item. Like I said, this is pretty much the pattern for the whole game. Every time there's a roadblock in the story, we go out onto Sam's desk to find something to help us move forward. And every time, the time of day and setting of the desk changes. I was honestly getting very bored of it after that long Troll Mountain chapter. This time, the desk had a giant volcano on the back windowsill that seemed to contain another stamp item. The whole desk was prehistoric themed, with even a little Jurassic Park gate reference where we need to collect these fossilized mosquitoes to open the big double door gates. We climb past squads of Humgrump's army, giant wooden dinosaur toys, and even across the surface of this one dinosaur friend who asks us to kill all these ticklish rats who seem to be on his body. Finally, we reach the bottom of the volcano and start to make our ascent to the top on the drawings of the different layers of the mountain. By grabbing this axe, Jot turns into a barbarian. And in this 2D platforming section, we need to chop through the terrain and enemy dinosaurs. After platforming through the different layers and running away from a T-Rex, we finally reach the top where we meet this character named Time Tim. Tim is a time traveler who commends us for our resilience in this dangerous landscape before revealing a portal back into the real world on top of the volcano where we can collect the bomb stamp. Using the bomb stamp, we can now completely blow up all the tanks, allowing us to progress. Honestly, a pretty powerful ability, but one that is extremely simple. Moving on throughout the beach, we come to this concrete area with giant batteries and a ton of Humgrump soldiers. After killing a bunch of enemies, I came to the realization that I could just hop outside the book and then use the bomb stamp to kill the enemies from out of danger on top of the book, which was pretty busted. This page had a word puzzle that had me changing goblins into batteries to place on buttons and turning these giant batteries into giant metal goblins and then using the bomb stamp to roll these giant goblins to different battery slots before returning the giant goblins back into batteries to power a different slot in the ground. Then, after opening up this second area and defeating all the soldiers, I could grab this hammer key and open up the gate. Here, it was time to say goodbye to Tumba. He guided us throughout Boogie Beach, but now he was heading home as we didn't need his guidance any longer. And so, with a little dance, our charming little buddy makes his exit. Reaching the other side of the beach, the gang makes a terrifying discovery. Moonbeard instructs us to hurry to Artia. The beach has a direct road to the capital, which is why Humgrump chose it to organize his attack. But luckily, Moonbeard has warned the queen to ready the defenses. So we head into Chapter 8, ready for a showdown at the castle. By the time we arrive at Artia, the city is in shambles. This is where the climax of the plot starts to occur, and I started to get excited again. Like, maybe the repetitiveness would end, and some kind of new or innovative gameplay loop was going to occur. But no. In the city, I exited the pages and used the bomb stamp to blow up all these tanks and kill all the enemies, before this mage guy appeared, launching us into Violet's minigame. It's just snood, but winning the minigame, the mage is defeated and we head on towards the castle. The mysterious hooded guy is here again and he talks to himself before running off again. Then, inside the castle, a standoff is happening between Moonbeard and Humgrump. Humgrump and Moonbeard are arguing, and it's revealed that they are brothers. But Humgrump, having enough of the conversation, ends up dropping a cage on the Queen and her royal subjects, and then another cage on Jot, Thrash, and Violet. This causes Moonbeard to turn his back on Humgrump, distracted by the cages, and then Humgrump brutally murders him, zapping him into dust. But it's a kid's game, by the way. Humgrump sits on the throne, causing the book to close and the Plucky Squire cover art to transform into the Magnificent Humgrump. The game essentially resets, showing some clever puns of the development team All Possible Futures becoming One Possible Future, and Devolver Digital becoming Dethroner Digital. And then we get a new title screen that brings us to a dark and gloomy version of Sam's room, where the room is now a complete mess and the book has now been put away on the top shelf, never to be read again. Also, the narrator straight up switches up and starts glazing Humgrump and slandering Jot. Like, what a social climbing piece of shit!
Once upon a time, there was a magnificent wizard named Humgrump.
So yeah, now everything's awful and we're locked up in a maximum security prison. We don't have our sword, but by manipulating the sentences on the ground, we're able to open our cell and begin our escape. But the narrator has other plans as he tries to narrate Jot's death. Luckily, we're saved by Pip, Moonbeard's mouse companion. He tells us that our items and sword are locked away on the desk outside the book, and our friends are also somewhere in the prison. The actual escape sequence has us repeating this minigame 3 times, where Pip does this music tile-based stealth sequence, sneaking past all the guards who are doing their paperwork to unlock a side entrance letting Jot progress. It's basically equivalent to Cadence of Hyrule or Crypt of the Necrodancer, but stealth only. I actually enjoyed this part. It was a pretty cool minigame, but one that was isolated to this part of the game and kept so simple. In fact, all the minigames in the game are like their own separate thing that aren't really expanded on past a base level. It feels like nothing is scaling in this game. The only progression of game mechanics I've seen are the items you collect from the outside world and enemy density in the combat. But the combat is so simple, it's not really engaging. The only thing keeping me going at this point was how the story wraps itself up, and the gameplay had become a slog to get through. I felt as though I was rushing through it to get to the end of the plotline. After saving Violet, we're roadblocked by another spiked spinning belt, and we must exit the book again to get our gear back. Outside the book, we're on the top shelf, but Paige helps us get down to the desk. Here we see Humgrump has given his army a giant cardboard castle to patrol and safeguard our equipment. So we stealth our way through the army's patrol until we reach our stored gear deep inside the castle. And after getting our sword back, I wasn't showing any mercy to Humgrump's army. I wiped out every last soldier guarding the rest of the items. Regaining the tilt gauntlets allowed us to flip the book off the top shelf and back onto the desk. And now, by using the stop stamp, we could progress to the next page past the spiked bell. This room had these soldiers acknowledging the enemy gates and how they only disappear when their associates get slain, which I thought was a funny fourth wall break. But then there was this stop stamp puzzle with these sliding blocks that just kind of broke. I only stopped this one in the corner. Why does the second one not slide? Instead, if I slide the blocks to the left and then stop the corner block, then it allows me to separately slide this block back to the right. Why? Who knows? Maybe it's just a bug. By acquiring the word broken, we can make the blocks fragile and then blast the crates open with the bomb stamp to reveal a key to the door. Okay, I'll give them credit. It's a puzzle that uses multiple items in tandem to complete, but a sliding block puzzle is still such a simple concept that's been done many times before. From here, we save Thrash from his cell, and then the game introduces a new mechanic where we can close the book to swap metamagic objects from page to page, which is smart, but why so late? This is the last area of the game. These puzzles are introducing like these cool new mechanics, but not implementing them in any challenging or creative ways. The whole game, we just keep getting cool ideas that are used like 3 times, and then their actual applications for puzzle solving are such letdowns that aren't explored to their fullest potential. As much as I enjoy the story, the characters, the setting, and the art that this game brings to the table, the gameplay is such a letdown. I've done all the theorizing I could to give myself an explanation, but it really is just a game carried by charm and lost in its direction. It just feels like they couldn't quite come to a consensus for what they wanted to accomplish when making the game. So what we get is repetitive, simple, cookie-cutter design with unfulfilled potential for the amazing puzzle adventure game that could have been. I really want to like it, I do, but I just feel disappointed when such a talented artistic vision isn't backed by a fun gameplay loop. So after exiting the prison, we get some backstory about Humgrump, wanting to be a poet and getting rejected, causing him to be a hateful wizard or whatever, and then it's revealed to us that this logo is actually a butterfly, which not so subtly foreshadows what's about to happen. After this creepy section in the castle, we finally reach Humgrump. He traps us in a meta-magic electricity box, and after a bit of gloating, his face goes green and he charges up his staff to kill us. But instead, he's hit with a bubble that puts him to sleep, and a cloudy figure floats into view. It was a colorless Moonbeard who frees us from our cage. It turns out, Violet made a potion that saved Moonbeard's life after his ink cloud floated onto a paper towel roll. But Humgrump suddenly wakes up and isn't done with us yet. He launches us into a rush of all the character-specific minigames where he is the enemy. Thrash fights the Humgrump Mega Eagle, Jot fights the Humgrump Honey Badger, and Violet fights the Humgrump Mage in Snood. So basically, more repetition, which was anticlimactic. But luckily, there's more to the fight than that. After defeating Humgrump at all 3 games, he disturbingly morphs into a dripping cocoon. Humgrump erupts from his cocoon outside the book, and Jot must go stop him from terrorizing the real world. And then, when we jump out of the book into the real world, Humgrump is this horrifying butterfly with his disturbing face and black and pink eyes. Like seriously, nightmare fuel. He launches fireballs at us from his mouth as we make our way to this mug to collect our little rocket ship friend. Now with the rocket jetpack allowing us to fly and the laser blaster in hand, the final fight truly begins with some new bullet hell style gameplay happening over the top of Sam's desk. This fight involves dodging an onslaught of attacks and firing the gun at Humgrump's eyes and tongue until he puts a shield up. Then we need to break the shield by shooting this tennis ball, allowing us to damage him again. After 3 waves, Humgrump's butterfly form is destroyed and he reappears on top of the volcano, where his staff breaks and a T-Rex chases him away. Reuniting with the gang, Queen Chroma appears too and congratulates us on banishing the evil Humgrump. So as it turns out, the hooded figure was actually Time Tim the whole time, who happens to be adult Sam's storybook character that was time traveling back to the Plucky Squire story to see the character that inspired his creation. He tells Jot that Sam thanks him heavily for inspiring his successes with the Time Tim book series, and he time travels away. And so the story ends happily, with the book closing revealing new cover art with the 3 warriors of Mojo and Pip. And the camera even pans over to see a rough copy of Time Tim made by Sam before fireworks light off outside the window and a title card introduces the credits. Honestly, a fine ending to the story. It didn't blow me away, but aside from reusing the minigames, I can't complain about a neatly done boss fight that feels like a fitting final showdown for the story. So yeah, I feel like I've said my piece with how I feel about this game. It's got great art direction, a great story, great characters, and a great setting with unlimited charm. But I can't quite shake the sentiment that the gameplay is not reaching its potential by not fleshing out any of its mechanics and being so incredibly simple and handholdy. Let me know what you think in the comments below and whether or not you agree or disagree with me. If the developers are watching, I apologize if I was being harsh. I wish no ill will towards your future endeavors, and honestly I'm excited to see what comes next from All Possible Futures, because clearly there's a lot of talented people working there. Please subscribe and like the video, and thanks for watching.